Conversations on hot topics with people who don't share your same beliefs. Your host, Sabrina Protic, Ricky Burney, and Joel Holt. Now let's get ready to have that conversation. Uncomfortable Conversations is powered by the Trendsetter Mentor Group, an exclusive membership for mentorship on Facebook.
Good morning, Tampa Bay. Well, not just Tampa Bay. We have people in Chicago and Texas we're going to be talking to. But right now, it's a beautiful day in Tampa Bay. The sun's out. I'm looking out my window. It's just beautiful. Ricky, how are you doing this morning?
I am doing amazing. It's been a great week so far. No complaints at all. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I want to know what it's like for the people up in Chicago. How you doing, Joel?
I'm living the dream.
I hear it. You know, I've been looking at frigid weather, frigid temperatures, like, you know, people in Texas and around the world that's, in those colder areas. And I'm just so grateful and thankful we don't have to contend with that. Glad I got my AC and heat fixed a couple weeks ago. So I'm what you call good. I'm good. So. We want to welcome everybody to Uncomfortable Conversation Show. My name is Sabrina Protic. I'm a financial coach and an author of the book Growing Ageless, Think Young and Live Younger, streaming live with my co-host, Ricky Burney, who's author of the book. He's an author and success coach, and the name of his book is Destined for Greatness, 90 Days of Transformational Affirmation, right here out of Tampa Bay. And our other co-host, Mr. Joel Holtz, who is our creative marketing director for Thriving Women Network and Uncomfortable Conversations. So welcome, gentlemen. And my question to both of you guys is off the cuff, but did either one of you have any uncomfortable conversations since our last show? Ricky?
I did. I had a few uncomfortable conversations. There was, I guess, a business relationship that needed to have a come to Jesus moment where we had to speak about just some things that were being stagnant. So it was a very productive conversation. And I think that from that, they understood my point of view and I understood theirs. And going forward, we'll be able to be more productive in how we go about doing things. So it was a great conversation.
Excellent, Ricky. You had an event you participated in this past week. What's that about?
Yeah, so that event was about treatment and health disparities with Black men, and also just the apprehension to have emotional vulnerability. So we had a great panel of people. I was one of the speakers as well. And we just discussed some of those things. Why do men, especially Black men, have an issue with being able to express their emotions, and just how that impacts their overall health physically, mentally, and emotionally? So it was a well received. We got lots of feedback, and it's leading to some other things as well. So just ready to continue that discussion.
Well, thank you so much for that. I'm sure some of those perspectives are going to weigh in on today's show a little bit.
Absolutely.
And Joel Holtz, any uncomfortable conversations for you?
No, because I don't want to get fired, so I'm okay.
Well, wait a minute. Now, aren't you're a family man, right?
Yeah.
So you haven't had any little one-on-ones with your kids? You shouldn't do that, and why?
I wouldn't say it's uncomfortable, but I mean, I guess when you're teaching your children to do certain things or be a certain way, I had definitely had a conversation about how to deal with people, so it's interesting, just in terms of guiding ones. I wouldn't say it was uncomfortable, but then a couple of weeks ago, my son did come up to me and had an uncomfortable conversation that I didn't expect. I was like, where did that come from? Okay, I guess we're going to talk about this right now, huh?
Yeah. When we think about uncomfortable conversation, it's not always about work or employment or social issues. Like I gave the example of me and my husband last week and having to deal with something that would almost like raise the hairs up on the back of your neck. And I know when you're raising kids, you're going to have those conversations because they're going to come at you like, whoa, like you said, Joel, I wasn't ready to talk about this. I guess you are. So, and at that point for parents, you're still the parent. You're not the friend and the buddy. That was what my mom taught me. You're never their friend. You're always parent. And you have to speak from authority, but listen gently, but know how you're going to direct the conversation. But isn't that kind of what uncomfortable conversation is? We have a mission here. Our mission each week is to empower our viewers and to have those uncomfortable conversations on personal and social issues that affect all of us. We think I'm good, but we do. We're confronted with these conversations. A mate, a child, a friend, a coworker, a business partner, even in our religious environments, spiritually, sometimes we're, having to deal with some conversations, but we want to enlighten our viewers on how to take the proper steps and prepare ourselves to have these uncomfortable conversations with people who may not share our same perspectives. These are conversations that we put off until the last minute because we don't want to have them because we're already anticipating the outcome based on our perspectives and our views. That's why, because we already know how we're going to try to drive the conversation. And that's what makes it uncomfortable. But shying away from these uncomfortable conversations may appear to be the easy option, but experience shows us that avoidance really does not work. Uncomfortable conversations believes that we avoid the conversation, but we miss, listen to this, we miss an opportunity. We miss an opportunity to deepen and strengthen our relationship with the people that we're about to have the conversation with. Ricky, would you like to introduce our guest? Because we're about to have an uncomfortable conversation.
Absolutely. So we have two distinguished guests today. Our first guest is Gary Rogers, who was here last week. He is a retired CFL player, linebacker, and founder of the company Check Your Game. Welcome to the show, Gary. Our second one is also a repeat guest, and her name is Chastity. She's an entrepreneur, a certified master life coach, empowerment speaker, and leadership trainer. She's also the managing partner of RBC Consulting Firm, LLC. Welcome to the show, Chastity, and we look forward to this robust continued discussion on what we spoke about last week. Back to you, Sabrina.
Thank you so much. And I want to say about our guest, Chastity's book, The Raw Hidden Process, that's definitely going to be a good read. And Gary Rogers, I just submitted my story on Check Your Game. So I'm telling you, both of those people, you definitely want to look into them, not only just to learn about relationships from Chastity, but also about how to elevate others on Check Your Game. So last week with our uncomfortable conversation, it was based on a question. Why are Black males supported only when they're athletes? Ooh, talk about uncomfortable conversation. This question was written in the Perspective magazine back in August 2019 by Joseph N. Cooper. Joseph's perspective was based on his own experience and research. We actually had an opportunity to have this uncomfortable conversation with our guest and also reviewed the data from the National Football League. In the highest grossing sports league in the U.S., Blacks only make up, only 70% of the players in 2018, while whites occupied more than 70% of the coaching positions and nearly 100% of the top executives. Why is this? So let's kind of underscore that for a minute so our viewers and listeners understand. Blacks, 70% of the players, whites, 70% of the coaching positions, and white, 100% of the executive positions. And so this is what drove Mr. Cooper to write this article and explore the question of why. So we discussed Joseph's perspectives on mainstream sports. He wrote that whites who control mainstream sports have long exploited Black athletes economically, psychologically, politically, and for entertainment. Playing amateur athlete union basketball was a big part of his development and his personal identity as a Black male growing up in the 1990s. Later, he says, I understood the racism embedded in this experience. I had teammates who were struggling academically, but were still allowed to travel across the country to compete, revealing that for Black males, athletic performance was valued more than their educational development. Joseph noted that the majority of the players were Black, while the coaches, organizers, and sponsors were white. Those groups got the real benefit. We players were all sold the same dream. We could get college scholarships, maybe even play professionally, which neither one of those happened, he said. They were going to continue our conversation with Mr. Cooper and his perspectives on the book, From Black Exploitation Back to Empowerment, and discover the 5 socialization models highlighting the multiple systems at play that influence how Black male athletes identify themselves. Our goal is to unpack and unlock the stereotypes and misunderstandings of Black and whites experience in sports from the different perspectives. So when we come back, we're going to open this can up. We're going to break for a commercial.
Thriving Women is sponsored by the Trendsetter Mentor Group, an exclusive membership for mentorship. TMG is an exclusive Facebook mentoring membership for thriving entrepreneurs with a culture of caring and sharing. TMG's mission is mentoring, inspiring, and empowerment. And if you're a thriving entrepreneur and inspired to surround yourself with like-minded peak performers, join TMG's exclusive membership group on Facebook by sending a members request to the Trendsetter Mentor Group. We are your membership for mentorship. Back to Thriving Women Talk.
NCAA college basketball players are seen as the people everyone wants to be. By the time many of them are in high school, they have already amassed thousands of fans, are poised to get a free ride to school, and are groomed for a lifetime of fame and millions of dollars when they go pro, right? Except it isn't that simple. NCAA players are monstrously exploited, with some of them who are literally starving at night while the NCAA makes billions of dollars from the revenue the players bring in. This disparity is most apparent during one of America's most celebrated annual sporting events, March Madness. During the 3 weeks of March Madness in 2018 alone, the NCAA made $900 million. The players? Zero. At present, NCAA President Mark Emmert has an annual salary of nearly $2 million per year. And some of the Power Conference commissioners earn salaries closer to the $3 million range. Coaches for Division I teams can also make millions more. But according to the NCAA's internal rules, the players are entitled to none of that. Member schools cannot use tournament revenue to pay their athletes based on an outdated NCAA principle of amateurism. This means that the college student athletes who bring in the money remain just about the only individuals to not bring home a big paycheck from March Madness. And the obvious economic injustice underscores a darker reality. Race plays a significant factor in who gets paid and who doesn't. Today, the student athletes who generate the most revenue for universities, brands, and TV networks in the football and basketball programs are Black. To maintain amateur status and thus be eligible to play, athletes cannot accept any money or gifts off their image or likeness.
Oh, come on,
Because
man.
of rigorous practice and game schedules, most cannot work while under scholarship, and some may go hungry or have difficulty paying rent. While many Black student athletes struggle, more than 82% of college basketball coaches are white, and more than 86% of conference commissioners are white. Not a single person of color has served as a commissioner for one of the Power 5 conferences. In 2015 alone, the top programs made a combined $9.1 billion. The NCAA itself signed an $8.8 billion TV deal with CBS Sports and Turner to air the March Madness Final Four in 2018. Each of these parties are able to gain some financial payout. The athletes themselves receive nothing. What is clear is that something must change. The NCAA must change their amateur policy, increase and mandate athlete stipends, or provide a percentage of their conference earnings to the players that make this all possible. Without the players, there would be no college ball. It's time for the NCAA to commit to their players as much as they do their own paychecks.
Welcome back to Uncomfortable Conversations. And our conversation today is on Black athletes, from exploitation back to empowerment. And it's based on author Joseph M. Cooper's book, From Exploitation Back to Empowerment. Amazon Books made this statement about the book. Previous critics have documented the damaging effects of the current exploitative sporting and education structures in the United States on Black males and the broader Black community. However, largely missing from scholarly literature and popular discourses on this topic is a comprehensive analysis of the heterogeneity among Black male athletes' lived experiences and outcomes over the lifespan. Joel, what is your perspective of the YouTube video that we just watched? What would you say? How do you feel about the information that was provided in that video?
I think it's a shame, but it's also the writers on the wall. I mean, the players are. It's going to get to a point where the best players are not going to go to the NCAA. If they were smart and they can get ahead of the curve, they would try to maintain that brand. But basically, they're going to end up suffering. And so I don't mind seeing it go away. I haven't watched NCAA basketball in a long time because the quality of it's really not there. And then on top of that, it's you do hear about like the exploitation of players. Like I remember growing up, and you would buy the video games, and you would get like your football, but then you get the college ones, right? And so but now you can't get that because the players are like, you can't make money off of our likeness, and that's us, and we can't do anything about it. So I support the players. I supported like the Fab Five and their position. I supported like all of that they should be compensated. Not you get paid, but in the terms of like a true living, but at least you get something where people are starving going on campus. It's like what the disparity is just ridiculous.
Absolutely. And while I have you, can you also just discuss 3 major issues that he covered in his book?
In the book that Joseph wrote, it addresses 3 major issues: the under-theorization of Black male athletes' socialization processes. Number 2 is the preponderance of deficit-based theories on Black male athletes. And 3, the lack of expansive analysis of Black male athletes from diverse backgrounds. Grounded in empirical research, this text outlines 5 socialization models of Black male holistic underdevelopment through sport and miseducation. So we're going to have this conversation on these 5 models.
I want to weigh in on that. Go ahead, Rick. Go ahead, Joel.
From the different perspectives with the goal of listening and learning.
Excellent. Sorry to cut you off there. I kind of wanted to weigh in. According to Joseph Cooper, the book also differs in that the incorporated multiple theological lenses to analyze those heterogeneous experiences, focuses on the experiences and outcomes of Black male holistic individuals across the lifespan, rather than only considering their experiences during their athletic careers as others work do. Cooper maps out 5, which we're going to talk about, 5 socialization models highlighting the multiple systems at play and that influence how Black male athletes identify themselves playing sports and after their career's over. So we're going to start out with model 1. Ricky's going to take us there.
All right, absolutely. And while we're doing that, can we also introduce our distinguished panel onto the screen as well? Welcome, panel.
Thank you.
Before I do the model, I just had one question that I wanted to just pose to everyone, since we're speaking about the word exploitation. In everyone's opinion, from your perspective, how would you define exploitation? And I'm going to start that off with Gary.
I was going to use other people's words to kind of mix it with my answer. Okay, I'm gonna have to do this. Let's see, exploitation. Exploitation is just when you're taking advantage of somebody. You know, basically, you're just using them for your own advantage, and that's basically it. Taking advantage of somebody. If that's okay, I'm going with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Chastity, let's hear your definition of what you feel exploitation is.
I'm just gonna piggyback on what Gary was saying, and basically being selfish and taking advantage of everything that's going on with another person, an act of selfishness.
Absolutely. Joel, on to
Uh,
you.
I was going to say that it's basically taking an advantage of someone's ignorance or circumstance to basically get ahead.
Absolutely. And just to, I guess, add on to everything that everyone said, you said the ignorance part in their circumstance. I think also it's the manipulation of people's experiences, traumas, insecurities, things that they know that people are dealing with. You know, when a person knows that you're going through some things or that you're not fully sure of yourself, they know that they can manipulate you and show you some things that will, you know, that will feed whatever thing that's missing within you. And when they can do that, they can give you the least amount and make the most out of you. So that's part of my definition of exploitation. But Sabrina, you have the formal, more concrete definition of what that is. So tell us about that.
Well, no, it's pretty much what all of you said is, and in my own words, and Chastity kind of nailed it for me too, is using someone or something for personal gain with their lack of knowledge, with them not knowing what's about to happen to them. So yes, I took the liberty of getting a formal dictionary definition. So I'm going to read that to you. The action of making use of and benefiting from resources. That's one of the definitions. And the other one is the action of or fact of treating people unfairly in order to benefit from their work. So I think we all kind of nailed that. Just throwing the other piece in it, without their education, without them knowing the whole process that they're about to be utilized for. To me, that's what makes them exploited. It's because they don't know what's about to happen, or at least the outcome of their participation in whatever it is.
That's where ignorance comes in. If you don't understand and you're doing something, you know, I mean, then they're able, I mean, music industry, even we're talking the sports, all of that. Someone else has figured out the game and they want you to do something for them. And you just think that you trust them and you sign or you do whatever and it's going to work out. And they're like, no, we got you. Sorry. Get a lawyer.
Exactly. You know? Gary nailed it as well. Gary put it in simple terms, especially having been in the industry. And you know, he related a story last week of these two athletes that were scouted out just for their skills and abilities so they could win a game. Simply that. And, you know, it would be okay if these young men understood why they're being scouted and they knew the short-term lifespan of whatever it was. Then is that really exploitation? No, because you're agreeing to that. But if you don't know what's about to happen and you don't know the end result, it is. I'm using you for this reason. Right, Gary?
Yeah. I was just thinking about that. I feel like high school and college is slightly different. Maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, in high school, I guess maybe they were getting a better education than where they grew up. But I think, if they would have known, if they would have been told, hey, by the way, you're going to come, this is the way it's going to work. You're going to be here 4 years. We like to win. To be honest with you, you're 6'11", you're 6'7". You guys are both great athletes. That's why you're here, and just letting them know it's your athletic ability that gave you the opportunity, which is okay, great. But, you need to think about your education. You need to think about all these things. But at the end of it, we don't have money at our high school program to help with all this stuff. I mean, it's not going to be I guess if they were to inform them about the end of it, just to educate them instead of, letting them be ignorant, like Joel is saying. But I think that would be important. But I think when you talk about college, when you're having kids come in college, you know, athletes, you're getting there because your athletic skill, right? But the thing is, you're not going to college. As I'm hearing all this and I'm listening to this author about all that stuff, I couldn't even understand his 5 points. Those words, Sabrina, I needed your dictionary, because I mean, seriously, it's some complicated words there. But I think, you know, when you go to school, I don't care what color you are, you're not going there. It's not about you and your sport. You know, that gave you the opportunity, gave lots of us opportunities to get to college, and many times a free college. The goal for that is to get an education, and that's most important. So, yeah, we could talk a lot more about different things. I'll just end it there, though.
Well, Ricky's going to break down those perspectives, those 5 big words that we didn't understand. We're going to break them down. So go ahead, Ricky.
All right. So our first model is the illusion of singular success model. And what this does, it details the belief among Black male athletes that sports is the only route to success, leading to identity foreclosure after their athletic careers, accompanied by depression, dissatisfaction, emotional trauma, and in some cases, death. What is your perspective? I'll start this one off with Chastity. What is your perspective of the model, and what can parents do in the early years in athletics to combat this tunnel vision mindset?
Well, the model, basically, his models are basically well-rounded with the same concept, but this particular model is dealing with miseducation, being misinformed, perceptions of what a Black athlete should consist of. And if we start and stop having the perception or the illusion that this is what it should be, it's one thing that he said in his book was, I like the dumb jock perception. And basically educating our Black youth and saying, you're not a dumb jock, you are gifted, and you're not inferior. And basically detangling the illusion that we basically put in the foundation of our community. So it starts there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I like that you said what we embed within the community. What's the Notorious B.I.G. line? Sling, clack, rock, or a wicked jump shot. So you have lines like that, and what do you think? We think it's just entertainment, but when kids hear that, they start to internalize those are their options. Now, Gary, what would you say is your perspective of this singular success model?
All right, you know how I do it, Ricky. With that question, break that down again, Sabrina. You want to do that?
Yeah, the question and put it in. This is called Gary's language. Here is the route to success. You know, what is the route to success, right, Ricky? Am I saying that right?
Yes, you're right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. By the way, you guys get me, right? You understand how I do it. A little slow with some things on occasion. So I think, since we're talking sports, I keep on focusing on, you know, starting off in college, you know, these athletes that are going to college. I think it's so important to know what the purpose is, you know, why you're going there. And it's about education. And you know what, without the education, I don't care if you play professionally afterwards, without an education, it's, you know, I don't think it doesn't matter white or Black, you don't have a lot, you know. Education is so important, and to go there, thinking like it doesn't matter. I mean, sports is great. That gave you an opportunity, and that's great. That's a really good thing. You know that, you know, your athleticism got you this opportunity to play sports. But man, I'm thinking about my own experiences. You know, we all have choices. You know, coaches are telling us to go to school, and we got leaders, helping us to find what do we like, what do we enjoy doing, like what do we want to do after college is up, and we all have those opportunities. Now, I can't say that I was in the same meeting with a Black friend, you know, teammate of mine, but from what I know, it wasn't like, oh my goodness, they didn't even ask me about my future. You know, I never heard that. And based off of the results of some of these friends of mine, I know they were treated the same because I see what they're doing. So really, I'm not even sure if I'm answering the question. I might be going in circles, but basically,
let me ask you this question, Gary. In your experience as an athlete, developing, growing up, did you feel that your parents focused singularly on that aspect, or do you feel as if they pushed you to excel in other avenues as well as your academics and not just on the athleticism?
So I do. Yeah, thank you. You know what? I do these. I used to do these speeches for kids a long time ago, and a part of my speech, what I would do is I would talk about, I love sports. I love playing sports, and all sports were a lot of fun. And I remember playing baseball. My mom would take me if I got a home run in baseball when I was playing Little League. She would take me and she'd get me a sundae, a strawberry sundae from UDF. And so that was like, you know what? I hit a home run, I get a sundae. And that was kind of the start of that. My identity was slowly becoming that of an athlete. And if I did good athletic wise, I would get rewarded. And so you're asking me if my parents were good parents and everything. But I mean, even I don't know if it's just the parents. I mean, like as athletes, as an athlete, I was looking around and I was getting rewarded, and I was saying, people would say, "Good job for doing this," and for athletic stuff, "Good job for doing that. You scored points. You got a touchdown, whatever." These shiny things on the outside, and slowly, myself or others, I'm sure it's the same way with all people, we're being rewarded for our athletic plays in life. And less about, hey, Gary, I saw the way you treated this kid at school. Oh, so amazing. Hey, everybody, let's stop. Let's do some announcements. Let's call out Gary Rogers, because Gary Rogers was seen helping out one of his classmates with their books or whatever it is, right? I mean, that stuff doesn't happen. It's usually like, this person is MVP. This person scored the most points. I mean, that's what goes in the news. It's always the shiny, like, what's going to look so good for others to read about or to see. It's that shiny on the outside, and it's less about the shiny that's really going on the inside. So I was no different. I was pushed, to like make plays in life, and that's gonna, I guess, create success or actually create contentment, which is so far from the truth.
Okay. And you just said something that I think is critical, the shiny things. That's what people kind of focus on. And in your situation, you had a pretty good background from what it sounds like. So it may not affect you or impact you in certain ways, but when you think about disadvantaged populations and places where people are underserved, those shiny things have more stakes. So, Joel, I want you to kind of weigh in on this. When we're dealing with underserved populations and the focus is on the shiny things involving being an athlete, but there's no focus on other things, how do you think parents can start to create, I guess, more of a foundation where they don't have the kids so focused on the athleticism that they completely disregard everything else that's necessary for them to have sustainability?
I think the game is to be sold and not told. So if your environment is not able to coach, I mean, like they've long gone is the, it takes a village to raise a child type of deal. And if you're not able to instill, or you're able to teach, I mean, today, honestly, most of today's players shouldn't be broke or should not understand. If you don't know what's going on now due to the internet, due to TV shows, due to information coming out telling you that, it's not sustainable. Personally, for me, with my children, I'm already trying to get them ahead of the game where it's like, yes, we want you to excel. I want you to be great, but I also want you to learn how to deal with people. I also want you to learn how to do this or take care of yourself in the future where if you invest in these things. My parents, I came from a pretty good background as well, but they didn't necessarily know everything, so they taught me a piece here or there. What I would have loved to learn some things about life things like credit, for example, or just if you look into these type of things for school afterwards. So it's nothing wrong with the players having those gifts growing up in school, but it's like, this is not the only thing because it can be taken away from you. If you get injured, if this happens to you, you might want to have a fallback. So even though it's unfair, like these players are going to like schools and getting exploited to a degree, at least you are there you can at least get the degree, because after you're done, you can use that. I mean, use the education, because after you're done, I mean, if you're done playing after so long, for so many, it's a shame that like at 35 or 38 years old, you're retired. Oh, you're old. Yeah, but you got 38 all the way to 80 years old, or whatever our life expectancy is. So at least take advantage of those things that were given to you and try to learn. But it's that, because that model's not going to change. If they're still going into the disadvantaged ones and that's their only ticket out of there, it's unfortunate. But if they could at least, with technology, there's no excuse for you not to learn that there's life after this sport. So you better prepare,
Okay, great insight. And this idea of sustainability actually goes directly into our next model, which is the elite athlete lottery model. And that demonstrates a diverse experience of elite athletes, rejecting the popular narrative that all athletes are financially stable once they have reached the professional level. Cooper explains that athletes who make millions in a short-lived athletic career often face bankruptcy after their professional career. We discussed the longevity of the average professional in football and the lack of guaranteed contracts. Why are so many parents not informed about the risk and rewards of playing sports, and why is it important to start teaching our children early about the need to have alternative plans? And for that one, let's actually bounce that to Chastity first. What would you say about that?
It goes back to miseducation, and I'm going to keep saying that, and his book is about that, and prioritizing, teaching your children what is priority in their lives, and how to prioritize those objectives and those goals in your life. So if you only teaching your kids Jordans is the best thing that's out there, but not teaching them how to live with life skills, common sense, and book sense mixed together, you're always going to have that flashy concept of the elitism. I need to have this, I need to have that. And it also goes back to integrity and what we talked about when I was first on this show. Integrity, having the foundation and instilling those values and those principles in your children. So I'm going to always go back to the miseducation and expound on each one of these models, because that is what we're lacking and we're missing from a family standpoint of this.
Absolutely. Spoken like a true transformational coach. And Sabrina, actually, I want to get your perspective on that too, because I know that you deal a lot with financial literacy and sustainability. So can you weigh in a little bit on that from your perspective?
Thank you, Ricky. It's the almighty dollar. And not only are the athletes recruited and lured, but the families, the parents, my mama, I can buy my mama a house, how many times have you seen these young guys, they never even had their first car paid for, now they got cars put in front of them. They got these big salaries levied in front of them. And the parents, maybe they have, less fortunate, not living per se in poverty, but maybe they're just very lower middle class or whatever. And now here's an opportunity. They got that one son or daughter that's going to make it and change their lives financially. So they think, because they don't realize it's a short-term game. And so like Chastity said, it's all about education. You know, who's telling them that, yeah, he's getting this pot, or she's getting this pot right now, but you better invest it and save. Don't go out and buy your mama a house right now, or your daddy, or buy this big car, because this income is not going to last. It's only for now. But to me, that's the exploitation piece of the families also being exploited, because they don't know what's about to not happen when that windfall of cash is gone.
I want to piggyback and give 2 more words: accountability and stop enabling. And since we're talking about this book, he's talking about the Black community. I really believe that sometimes as our culture, we enable our boys, especially when we find out he or she has the potential. So we don't hold them accountable for life events in their life, and we enable them. And then these models are executed, and that's why we have these certain type of models in place. That's why we have these books in place, and that's why it's a miseducation within us.
Ricky, let me piggyback on Chastity. Hey, us mamas, this is mamas talking here. So give me and Chastity a platform. With mamas coming out, we're talking about families, but also making sure that the families, their future, their financial future is taken care of. Investments and benefits, and making sure that health-wise, I've read stories where moms, dads, my mama had cancer, this, that, and the other. Maybe they didn't have plans in place to take care of their parents or themselves, because they had this windfall of cash, but nobody was working on the back end. So again, like you said, with my financial background, and some of the things I'm seeing is that, hey, they had all of that. They even had the benefits, because I heard that, in the NFL, and I don't know if it's just NFL, but if you don't work a certain amount of years, you don't get those pension plans and those benefits and those health benefits. Maybe Gary can weigh in on that, but some of them are offered health benefits. We had an athlete I spoke with last 2 weeks ago where he was offered healthcare coverage, but his family wasn't. Then some years later, they gave it to his wife, but not his children. So who tells them that? Who educates them on that? You better take care of self, because when you're done with this, it's all gone.
And let's even think about this, because we could say, why aren't the parents informed, and what can they teach? You can only, give what you have. And a lot of these families, a lot of these people, these athletes, they're coming from a generational mindset of poverty. And when you have a generational mindset of poverty, when you get a little something, you don't know how to sustain what you have. You don't know how to be able to make the resources you have stretch and, work for you and expand. So they themselves have not been conditioned to learn how to make money work for them. They work for the money. So it's completely, the athletes, in a sense, have to be the ones that break that generational mindset. So they already have a lot against them. Joel, in your opinion, what do you think about this model and some of the discussion that we've had?
It's basically what I think I brought earlier. I guess it's the challenge that, if you can, like I said, I don't feel sorry for anybody now, because there's too much information out here now that says that you should be smart about your situation. There's too many articles going. We're having a discussion right now about the NCAA. If you realize this, we're only talking about a 20, 30-year span of this, like, there's only like maybe 2 generations of players, where the 70s, those players didn't make that much money. Guys still worked summer jobs. In the 80s, you started to see some of that money. The big money didn't come until the 90s. So we're talking only in 20 years. And if you're not seeing, if you didn't even see ESPN broke, for example, like, that's eye-opening. A lot of these guys they're the ones that got the first big checks. They're the ones that spent all the money and did all that crazy stuff. If you've seen a lot of these athletes and some of their examples, and the sample size of this, it's not, the biggest thing to me was that, like, when they talk about like the NFL, there's only been like 5,000 players, period, like, that's played. out of billions of people. So like we're having this conversation about a very small population of people who've had a little bit of success. In NCAA, I'm sure that number is a little bit more. Clearly, there's thousands of or hundreds of thousands of people, or maybe millions of people that have been in NCAA or in the college ranks. But now, I mean, you should be able to know, like, okay, look, it's an unfair system. You should be able to take advantage of this. And if you're not, I don't feel sorry.
And that's a great insight, and I agree with that. I guess here's the thing that I empathize with people like that is I like the fact that they use the word the elite athlete lottery model, because when I think about the lottery and how a lot of people who win the lottery go through all of those funds and then they end up being broke again, it makes me really think about how sometimes people come into fortunes and they're just not ready for that at that time. They just have not had the proper preparation to be able to receive those resources. So people use them. If you have not healed certain parts about yourself, if you have not learned how to say no to people, if you have not learned how to have inner value and not need the validation of other people, you will blow that money in no time, because you want to show people that you're somebody. And showing people that you're somebody, they're going to be there while the money is there. But once it's gone, you're by yourself, you're in isolation, and you're broke.
But so see, my point, Ricky, is that first generation, we get that. Okay, they went through it, and maybe even the second generation. Now you're in the third generation. You can't say, like, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. After that, it's like, no. So
see, everybody does not have the resources, regardless if it happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s. That's the only thing that I agree with you, Joel, to a certain point. But still, even in today's society, everybody doesn't have the same resources. And I can tell you one thing: the reasons why our opportunities have presented itself to me is because I had the resources and the opportunity and the knowledge. And when you have resources, you can open doors for others, and doors are open to you. There's still individuals within the community and outside the community that does not have the resources. And people do not understand how powerful resources and connections are. That's only point that I don't agree with what you're saying. Because I agree. One time on you, 2 times, 3 times, you just need to get it together. But there's a percentage of people that just don't have the resources, and this is their opportunity in that lottery model to get it.
But I mean, when I say I totally understand resources. Having a financial planner, having someone to tell you that stuff, and maybe you don't understand about how to use your credit better, all those type of things. What I'm saying is that if you are in a position where you have college coaches recruitment coming to get you, like, it's like you're big time. Okay, this isn't just like, okay, I didn't know, because clearly they've been coming for the last so many, in the last 20 years is when I'm saying that this new culture has arisen. The 70s and 80s, the 70s, the 60s, 70s, clearly people came to colleges to recruit players, but that money wasn't there. Now we got this big money. So everybody's got a phone. I mean, they talk about Comcast is on TV. We're bringing the internet to all the, disenfranchised areas. And like, so if you can look up information even on your phone to at least give you something. I agree with you, Chassie. Not everybody's going to understand how to invest your money, right? But at least you can learn how to save your money. I mean, that's the number one thing you could do: save your money at least.
Okay. Before we go to commercial, I just want to bring Gary in really quickly. Gary, how were you able, I guess, when you had all this going on at the time, how were you able to stay grounded and not get caught up in this lottery or, and getting caught up in the shiny things? What do you think kept you grounded in a sense?
Well, I wasn't a success story, like I'm a white guy, and I fell just like many of other athletes into this path of, I was going down my own path. My foundation, like, I had a strong foundation of faith when I grew up, but we all have choices. We have free will, and I made bad choices. I blew money. I made bad choices on the weekends. I made bad choices with relationships. I made bad choices while I was while I had my full scholarship. I sometimes didn't go to school. I didn't think about my classes. I remember the day of graduation, when I finished graduating, I had a Johnson & Johnson interview. And you know what? I blew it off. I had Johnson & Johnson interview, right? Was just set up, just set on my lap, right? From Vanderbilt. And I blew it off. I went back home. I missed it. I missed it on purpose because I can remember, I don't feel like doing it or whatever. Made lots of bad choices, but now, when I got to be 27 and when I got to this miserable spot, I was still playing sports and playing football. By the way, this isn't a short answer. You probably need that commercial. What do you think? You want to get that commercial, Ricky, or what?
Commercial end, Gary. We'll be back.
Uncomfortable Conversations Talk Radio is sponsored by the Trendsetter Mentor Group, an exclusive membership for mentorship. You can follow all our hosts on Facebook. Search Trendsetter Mentor Group and join. Now back to the show.
We want to turn that into a book. All parents with kids playing sports will want to know about. I loved it. It's called The Sports Gene, Inside the Science of Extraordinary Athletic Performance. I talked to the author, David Epstein, about a headline-grabbing book that he's written. It tackles some of the most controversial, really taboo topics in sports today, including whether nature or nurture makes the best athlete and whether some ethnic groups are better suited to succeed at athletics.
In Kenya, we're used to thinking of all Kenyans as being great runners, but really when I visited, it's one tiny tribe that makes up 10 to 12% of the population there, the Kalenjin tribe, that produces the vast majority of the good runners. This is a Kalenjin phenomenon, not Kenyan. And one thing that they happen to have is their ancestry is at low latitude, hot and dry climate. They have extremely long limbs proportional to their body size. And that's an evolutionary adaptation for cooling.
So what had been a taboo subject, that certain ethnic groups are genetically predisposed to athletic superiority, really it's more that there's an evolutionary fluke, that there's something that allowed people to get by that then can be applied athletically.
Absolutely, and it means they're worse for some other things. So people with northern latitude ancestry, you and I, Europeans, Michael Phelps, have longer torsos, which is like the long hull of a canoe, so that's better for swimming. Mm-hmm. He has extremely short legs. Michael Phelps is 6'4", has the same inseam as the guy who holds the world record in the mile, who's 5'9". Those guys wear the same size pants.
And I want to discuss something that a lot of parents watching at home are going to be interested in, the idea of the specialized athlete, the kid who's playing the club, playing year-round, as opposed to maybe someone, say, of my vintage, somebody who played all sports seasonally. What did you find makes the best athlete?
So there's some evidence that in certain sports, gymnastics, some evidence for golf, that early specialization helps. In other sports, it looks like acquiring a range of experiences and skills through your teen years actually benefits athletes later on. You look at a guy like Steve Nash, right? One of the most skilled basketball players who ever lived. Didn't get a basketball until he was 13 years old. Played soccer. So it looks like now that the best thing to do is to sample, find the best fit for your unique genome, and then specialize in the mid-teen years, kind of 15 and 16. That's the pattern that most of the elites have.
Figure out what your skill set is, go find the sport that emphasizes it. It is a fascinating book. We could spend hours on it. We shan't, but it is The Sports Gene. It's by David Epstein. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Ooh.
I know there's a lot to be said there. Gary, you want to finish your comment, or we can move on about the commercial?
Yeah, I would just, the bottom line is, I had choices. We all have choices. And, I had a really good foundation when I was younger, but I chose my own path. That's the bottom line. I blame it on me. Of course, when I got to be 27, I changed course and I decided to not go down Gary's path. And so I think, like Chastity, it's like this foundation, we all have a foundation. Like, what is the foundation that's allowing us to make good choices? Because when you have a bunch of money in your face, or when you have these choices on the weekend, they're like, what are you going to choose? Like, and so what's preventing you? What's making you make that right choice as opposed to the bad choice? What's preventing you of like blowing money instead of keeping in the bank, or doing the thing that you shouldn't be doing on the weekend as opposed to saying no to it? Like, what is that foundation in their lives? And so for me, at 27, I finally had that strong foundation, my faith in God, and that was what allowed me to begin to start making better choices in all areas. And I think really, when it comes down to it, I think that's an important thing. What's our foundation? What kind of foundations do we have, and what's allowing us to choose this or choose that, make good choices, bad choice? I don't know. I don't want to get into the whole faith thing, but for me, that was an important part of my story.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that perspective. And we appreciate you. And just to remind our audience that we're talking about a book written by Joseph M. Cooper, From Exploitation Back to Empowerment is the title of his book. And we're exploring these 5. We probably won't get to all 5 of them because there's just so much content here, and we really need to unpack these perspectives. But we kind of saw a little video of, I just never even thought about analyzing the human body, and, inseam and leg length and torso, and, who's best for swimming and who's best for running and who's best for, running backs and who's best for linebackers and who's best for place kickers and stuff like that. I mean, it shows you that, there's a lot of forethought that goes into why a human being is selected for a certain thing, right? And this is what we see in sports. We call it exploitation. But is it, to some degree, picking the best man or woman for the job because of their build, because of their potential skill set? I'm going to throw this out here. I went to the dentist many, many years ago to get braces, and I was surprised at what the dentist said. This goes with genetics. Well, Ms. Farmer, you really don't need braces because the jawline of African Americans is so strong. I never even heard that before. Says, if you notice that a lot of them don't wear braces and they don't need that because their jawline is so strong. And then he went on to say, just like athletes. And he went on to kind of compare that, athletes and their leg structure and their kneecap and all of that, how they can bear certain things that maybe other cultures can't. So is there a science to this? I want to throw that out there.
In my humble opinion, and boy, is it humble, I think if based off of how a lot of Africans came over here to come over to the United States, I think it's more like a selective process. If you're grabbing some of the best, or whoever you're grabbing, and then you throw them on a ship, and then only the best make it, because a lot of them, they didn't make the journey. You only got the best of the best that could have made that type of journey. So now, based off of almost like a selective, inadvertent selective breeding process, you're basically, and then you mix cultures. That's where there's more propensity, in my opinion, why people, especially the African American person, ends up having more of these better traits, because other groups of people didn't have to go through that type of journey.
Interesting. Let's kind of pull it back a little bit. Some closing comments on, that we've talked about the athlete, exploitation. What about the families, their role in this chastity, their role in options for their children beyond sports? I mean, they don't have to, Gary, you said you rewarded with that ice cream, right? When you perform well. What is the parents' role in navigating their children towards education over sports, or in conjunction with finding the balance?
I believe that parents have the first, I'll say this. For me, if I had a son, i.e. a daughter, but if I had a son and he was athletic, at an early age, when I basically identified that he has some type of athleticism, I would tell him, you're a student first. It's all what you bring into a child's mind as a parent, because they're a sponge. So they only know what you basically first tell them and first show them. So the first thing that I would be advocating in my house is that you're a student and then you're an athlete. and I'll keep embedding it in their life. But I think parents have to realize, and I think parents exploit their children. We didn't really talk about that. But parents exploit their children to get the best and get a better life for them. So it's all on what you instill in your children at an early age. It was funny that I remember I was writing a blog this week, and I talked about the first thing that I remember my dad instilling in me. And it was at 4 years old, and I had to learn this quote: "You must stand for something, or you will fall for anything." But he changed it and said, "Chastity, you must stand for something, or Chastity, you will fall for anything." So it goes back with, how do you train your child?
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Ricky, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with Chastity. I do believe that at times parents use their children as tools for their own breakthroughs. Sometimes it's living vicariously through your children because maybe you had some dreams and some aspirations and life just didn't take you there. And this is kind of like your second chance at getting whatever that is. And in that sense, because a kid might have the build to be able to play these sports and everything, that may not be their aspiration, but because you already saw that at a younger age for them, you push them towards that. And I think that goes back to the elite athlete lottery model. I think it goes back to the singular success model, because all of that comes from sometimes the parents wanting their kid to be in certain fields. They want to be successful. And sometimes they may have wanted to be that athlete. And hey, I have a son who's tall. He has the build of a football player or a basketball player, and I'm going to do everything I can to push him to do that. And even if that means neglecting some other things that might be important, maybe he's very creative, maybe he's a writer, but all of that to me doesn't matter. I want him to go towards what I feel is going to give me what's going to fulfill what I had always wanted to do. So I think the thing as parents, what they have to do as well is to honor what the kid wants to do, support them. If they want to be athletes, support them in that, but also ensure that they are well-rounded and that they develop all the other aspects of their greatness.
Thank you so much, Ricky. And Gary Rogers, final words on this question of the parents' role and exploitation of their children and finding the balance between sports and education. Should they be equally involved in seeing the education through first, or sports, or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, just from what I hear, I think it's important. It's so important for two parents to be a part of kids' lives and to instruct them the way that they should go through life in all areas, not just sports, but all areas. And I think that may be the problem. I think somebody was talking about it. There's like this cycle that has been taking place where, the parents, maybe they didn't go through college, they grew up in poverty, and then, and then they continue that same thing when they were little kids, and then they're going to do that. They just don't know how to get out. So like, how can a parent who hasn't gotten out, how can they encourage their kids with something that they don't even know how to get out, right? So I think that cycle thing is a problem. So, okay, so the next thing is, if these kids are playing sports in college, because, we're talking sports show, and it's like most of these kids are playing sports in college, right? So now it's the college's responsibility to give them this encouragement and show them how to do it the right way. And I think colleges are probably doing much better job at that than before. And of course, like Joel says, there's technology, phone, you can read it all, see it all. But then that goes back to foundational things, because, when you see something real shiny and now you're a professional athlete and you can buy that shiny thing, what's your foundation saying? Is your foundation saying, listen, I'm going to make money and I'm going to save it because this is important, and this is how I'm going to do on the weekends. This is how I'm going to, what's that foundation of ours? It's like, so you need this foundation. You need a strong foundation by something like, I don't know. I mean, I know what it is for me, but you need this foundation that's going to help you with this, but I think the colleges are going to be the next, ones to help push these kids, because I think a lot of times the parents, they don't know because they haven't done it, right?
Great perspective. It's like it's new territory for everybody. The child, the parent. So, we've unpacked and talked about a lot of things. We've still got a few more perspectives to go. So we're going to invite all of you to come back with us next week to finish the other 3 perspectives, talk about how exploitation by this author, Mr. Cooper, how he made all these topics relevant to what's going on now in sports. So we certainly appreciate all of you. We want to thank Joel Holtz, Ricky Burney, Chastity Saunier, and Gary Rogers for weighing in on these also important topics. We've got a nation of young people ahead of us, some not even born yet, some in high school preparing for college, and some getting ready to go into professional sports. And we certainly want to lay this out. Maybe perhaps it can help empower, inspire, and open up the door for uncomfortable conversations on the topic of sports. So we want to thank you again for joining us. We want to thank our executive producer, Mr. Daryl A. Johnson, our engineer, Alan Chafin, for making this show possible each week. We want to invite you back again to share uncomfortable conversation with us. This is Sabrina Prodick signing off, and we will see you next week.